Shia rebels seizing Yemen's third largest city over the weekend as thousands took to the street in protests. Officials say one person was killed, four wounded when Houthi rebels fired on the crowd. Those protests follow ISIS claiming responsibility for suicide attacks in Yemen's capital last Friday. Joining me from Newsmax LA, it's our good friend and Newsmax contributor Larry Elder. And joining us now to go in depth on this story, Kyle Shideler, Director of the Threat Information Office at the Center for Security Policy. Kyle joins us from Newsmax, Washington. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen offered this reaction to the attacks. Let's take a listen and then we'll get your thoughts, Kyle.
Events of recent weeks and days seems to be leading Yemen farther away from a peaceful settlement and towards the edge of civil war.
What about it, Kyle? Is the country on the verge of civil war?
Well, I think the country has been at civil war for some time now. There's been a low-intensity conflict between the Houthis and Sunni militants, including al-Qaeda, but also other Islamist militias. And the Houthis have now swept through into power with some assistance from the previously ousted President Saleh. So what we are seeing is an Iranian proxy moving to take Yemen and encircle their longtime strategic foe, Saudi Arabia.
Kyle, the Obama administration has touted Yemen as one of its foreign policy successes. Was it ever a foreign policy success, really?
No, it wasn't. What it was the Obama administration model of drone strikes from afar, attempting to manage a situation that was not really manageable. At least not with a great deal more effort than they were willing to put into it. You know, we had a situation in the Arab Spring where the Yemeni president was ousted and he was replaced by individuals in the parliament closely aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood. It was not a good situation, and we made a strategic mistake there.
Kyle, according to Time, at least one expert maintains the ISIS claims responsibilities for the attacks of last Friday are not credible. What is your take? Who is responsible for those attacks?
I would believe that they probably are the Islamic State. In Yemen, al-Qaeda has issued a general strategy of targeting Houthi militants but attempting to avoid larger Shia casualties, whereas targeting the Shia civilian population, is par for the course for the Islamic State. They're looking to invoke a reaction to bring as many Sunnis to their side as they can. If the Houthis overreact and engage in attacks against Sunni civilians, that will then bring people to the Islamic State's side. By comparison, al-Qaeda attempts to avoid harming what it considers Muslim civilians generally, thereby earning larger goodwill from the Muslim world. That's their difference at a tactical level.
In an interview with John Brennan, the CIA director, he refused to say pulling out of Iraq was a mistake. Our pulling out of Iraq, did it have an effect on things in Yemen, Kyle?
I think it has to have an effect on the larger play generally, because people realize that the United States has failed to show staying power. You know, if we remember, Osama bin Laden said, "The people respect a strong horse," and he pointed to our pulling out of Somalia, and prior to that, our pulling out of Beirut after the attack by Hezbollah. So we have a reputation in the region that if you hit the United States hard enough, they will withdraw, and we showed that again when President Obama pulled us out of Iraq.
Well, speaking of pulling out of situations, as I understand it, in Yemen, we had special ops forces there, and over the weekend, because of the, quote, deteriorating situation, our special forces have pulled out of there. What message is that sending to ISIS?
Well, I think it has to show a very attractive situation. They are now free to operate in Yemen against one of their favored targets, which is the Shiite militias. And we have really no eyes on the ground anymore, no ears to watch and listen, which is what we need to be doing. So we're in a situation now where, because we thought we could do this with a sort of hands-off motif, now we're left with no hands at all.
Brennan says that we are containing the enemy. Are we?
There's no way you can describe this as a containment. Whereas we used to have operations in Yemen, now we're out. The Iranians are encircling Saudi Arabia. Taking over Yemen with the Houthis enables the Iranians to link up with their allies in Sudan, where they have a number of military installations in the port of Sudan. So this enables them to project power across the Red Sea on both sides if they're successful in Yemen. There's no way that this is described as a containment situation. This is an example of the United States being rolled back. We should be in the opposite situation. We should be rolling back Islamic militancy wherever we encounter it. And the reality is right now we're doing the opposite.
About 2 minutes remain, Kyle. I'm interested, we talked about the withdrawal of American personnel, especially our special forces and special ops people, but also how much equipment did we abandon? How much of that is now in the hands of the Houthis or by extension ISIS?
Well, the reporting indicated that we disabled the heavy weapons when we fled the embassy, and the small arms were left at the airport with bolts removed or barrels removed, which is really kind of an unfortunate situation to have U.S. servicemen, Marines, departing a country unarmed rather than, with their heads held high. We had a Marine Expeditionary Unit. They specialize in reinforcing embassies, in conducting these sorts of evacuations in an orderly way. We could have done that. I don't think it was necessary to kind of leave. And what's important is what is viewed, right? So if it's viewed that we left Yemen with our tail between our legs, that's what the enemy is going to interpret as a success.
Kyle Shideler, assessing the threats in the Center for Security Policy, joining us from Newsmax Washington. We appreciate your time today. Of course, Larry Elder, we respectfully request your presence to continue. Right now, time for a Newsmax national weather update. I am sorry to say we lost our weather update. Let me tell you what will be ahead today. Let me bring back, if I could, Kyle Shideler very quickly from Newsmax Washington, also Larry Elder. Kyle, national security and presidential politics. Ted Cruz announcement today. In the minute that remains, your assessment of Senator Cruz being the first candidate in the race, what that means for foreign policy considerations.
Well, the Center for Security Policy was very proud to have Senator Ted Cruz attend our Defeat Jihad Summit prior to President Obama's failed Countering Violent Extremism Summit a few weeks ago. So his entering the race is a positive in terms of national security, because I think at least at a minimum we're going to have a national security discussion that this country has not had in some time. In the previous presidential election, there was a desire to discuss primarily domestic politics, and we are seeing the results of that, a absence of attention on national security, and what we're seeing overseas now in the Middle East and elsewhere is the result of that.
Kyle Shideler, we thank you for talking about national security, assessing threats, and a bit of an assessment of presidential politics today as you join us from Newsmax Washington. Larry Elder, we ask you to hang in there. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about Ted Cruz with you later this morning. Right now, just let me keep everybody apprised. Of course, we hope to have Senator Cruz's official announcement live when he makes it from Liberty University later in our program. It's scheduled for 10 a.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, we will welcome in Bernie Carrick. He has some thoughts about what's happening in Iraq and also what's happening with gun laws in New Jersey. All that and more ahead as America's Forum continues.